Broadcasting from the Red Bed Plains, you are now listening to Through the Prairie Smoke.
Thanks again for joining us, y'all.
If you're still around.
If you're still around. So we got a fourth episode for you here about the Fox Sisters, and we're going to try to wrap it up. And we've been building to wrap it.
Crazy.
We've been talking about all this history and all this stuff, but we haven't talked about any of the fun stuff. We haven't talked about what was going on at the seances and what the Fox Sisters did that was different from other people who were spirit communicating.
You didn't like the big chicken theory? That wasn't...
No, I think
that
that's
wasn't fun.
No, I think that's a lot of fun.
Oh, okay.
But I think a lot of people, if they're like, "When are we going to talk about the ghosts and stuff?" Like this is when we're going to talk about that.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But before we can go through it, we've got to have some smoke.
Yes.
So, what are you smoking?
Surprise, surprise, a cigar.
Hmm.
I think I've smoked this one on the last or the one before that, but it's AJ Fernandez Bellas Artes. Yours smells really good tonight, and it's something different, right?
It is something different. So what I want to do is smoke more Autumn Evening, because we did that commercial for him last time. But I thought, man, it's boring to just talk about the same thing over and over again. Now that you have, I feel bad about thinking that. But since you've already smoked that.
Oh, it's fine.
Oh, good. Because I smoked Toad Morton twice. But
yeah.
Anyway, tonight's selection is Gentleman Caller.
Listening, Barry?
A blend of Virginias and Barleys, with a dash of deer tongue for a vanilla-like sweetness and a smidge of perique for spice. This mellifluous mixture is so fragrant that Grandma always kept a few bowls around as potpourri to make her favorite beaux feel right at home when they came calling.
It says that?
It does say that.
That is awesome.
It's another Cornel and Deal blend. I don't know how to pronounce any of this stuff. I've just read this.
It was beautiful.
Well, thank you. Also, I'd like to meet the guy who does these things. Who uses mellifluous? Mellifluous. Somebody get a thesaurus. So anyway, yeah, and deer tongue is one of those things where it's like, you put deer tongue in your pipe,
yeah.
it'll that flavor will always stick there. So you have to smoke it in a different pipe.
Got to buy another pipe.
You got to just buy another pipe. So our producer said it was Latin words mellifluous, to flow like honey. So there we go.
Well, it smells good.
I don't know if deer tongue taints your pipe or not.
I'd call bull baloney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by all means, if you need an excuse to buy another pipe,
I think
feel free.
That comes from, there's people that have tuned their taste buds just like anything else, like wine tasters that have tuned in on taste, and maybe they can tell.
Sure.
If somebody puts mints, even if they're in the wrappers, in a bowl of M&Ms,
oh, sure.
those M&Ms are contaminated.
Yeah, well, they say the same thing about the types of cigars you're storing in your humidor.
Yeah, you don't want to put your aromatic
Yeah.
next to your regular cigars.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Some people just don't have that fine tune, so they don't care.
We're not, we don't claim to be experts.
We're not picky.
Yeah, we just enjoy the experience. Okay, so we've got our plan. We've got our smoke.
And we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So
this is the banger episode.
Right. Let's go through the prairie smoke. So let's talk about seances. The Fox Sisters start doing these private sessions for people. They're not really doing big shows anymore. They're doing seances. And we're talking about seances where it is spirit communication. We are talking to humans whose spirits are lingering, right?
Right.
Okay. You had an interesting bit of information. The first that we know of, the first written record of spirit contact.
I don't necessarily know if it's a record, but it is the first mention.
A mention of spirit communication, which was when?
It was actually all the way back in 1760. The book was called Dialogues of the Dead by a George you know, he was a first baron.
Oh, that's good.
Did you know that, Tom?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. In England is where it was published.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a cool little snidbit.
Yeah. So what's going on at a seance? How many people are involved usually, do you think?
Well, you know, it's funny you asked that, but I did read this today that Leah, when she's describing a seance circle, she considered up to 6 people sitting at a table. That's not like a rule.
Sure.
It's just that's kind of what she considered a sit-in, a typical sit-in, I guess, for her anyways. Personally, I would think that's a good number because I wouldn't think you'd want to go more than 10 people.
Sure.
I think that's too much.
Yeah.
For private.
Sure.
What you would consider private seances.
Yeah, we're not doing a demonstration.
We're not doing demonstrations like in the beginning or yeah. I think once you get that many people, it's a party trick.
Yeah, you're going for entertainment.
Whether it's real or not, it's gets that vibe.
This is the fun evening. Yeah. But yeah, the fewer people you have, the more intimate it can become, the more attention paid to specific people, I guess. So they're talking to a lot of different people just because this is the new thing. We're talking to spirits. We're talking to humans who have passed on. So we sit at a table, and sometimes in the demonstrations, all the lights would have to be up. But you come in for a sitting, and the lights are turned low.
So this is such a new thing for people, and I'm sure, and I have read where there are rules to conducting a proper seance, but in reality, if you think about it, who are you to say to make these rules?
Right.
But typically, yes, either lights would be low or they'd be off. But there's seances that are mentioned through those books that are in light. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, especially when you think of a seance and you see movies with seances, it's usually dark.
And we're talking about this being a new thing. Where do we get the term seance?
It's
French
word for session.
Yeah.
And then if you want to go further back, the old French word would be sit-in, or a meaning for sit-in.
So a seance is a sit-in, a hangout.
Let's touch base on the Fox Sisters style of seance,
sure.
I guess. Because there are different varieties of seances. I have a few examples, actually. You could have religious seances, and then you could do stayed mediumship, which is more of your demonstrations and your performances, kind of like the Corinthian Hall that we've mentioned. And then you got leader assisted, which is more of your private setting, medium controlled with spirit guides. And then you have informal, which would be without a medium. This would be more like your home circles. I think that's what they used to call them, is like, because when spiritualism came really big, people were wanting to branch out and do it on their own. They wanted to sit at home and do it themselves, and you didn't necessarily have to have a medium. So they would have these family circles or these circle sit-ins just in their private homes. So, and then I think that's where a lot of the rules came into play later on.
Sure.
Like there's several books out there that the whole book is just written about the rules of sit-ins. So like I said, that would be more informal.
Yeah.
So, but those are some varieties of it.
What's got me interested is, what would a religious seance be, do you think?
That's a good question, because as we've talked on here about different religions and their views, I heard this last night, and I think this plays into it a little bit. In explaining that Buddhism, and like I was just listening to a different podcast last night, and his parents happened to be monks, and he was talking about how when he was growing up, they would go to temples, and we're not talking about Himalayan style monks
Are we
that
here in
like up in
America?
the mountains, silent. And we're talking about over here, and they would have temples, and basically they would go there once a day and basically meditate. So it would be they're Zen.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not getting into that religion. I have no idea, anything about it. But what I think relates to what you're asking is that it's kind of like that. I think it's more of maybe a meditation
Focusing on
style. Yeah, because but who am I to know? I don't,
Sure.
because I don't know which religions would actually sit in and do, like, I guess when I think of a religious seance, I'm not thinking of sit down at the table like all the other ones.
Sure.
A lot of people say they can talk to God or they hear God. Okay.
That's
as
what
in Christianity.
Yeah.
So maybe something along those lines.
Sure.
Maybe
That's
they're
what I want.
channeling in on that.
And part of me wonders, like, oh, we can talk to spirits. Let's go try to talk to Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peter, whoever else.
Yeah.
Mary and Joseph.
So
Peter, Paul, and Mary.
So that's a good question. I would say for the Fox sisters, I know that Maggie and Kate did a lot of demonstrations, and I know that they went to several cities, especially when word got out and the spiritualist movement was ramping up, that they were invited to different cities and did demonstrations. And then also for Crack It Open,
Sorry.
they would do these demonstrations not only to show people, but also for skeptics and stuff,
Sure.
and science and all kinds of. There's different reasons everybody went to these demonstrations.
Yep.
But Leah strictly did sit-in home
Private ones.
seances, and they were private to the point where it was only friends. Like
Right.
she didn't do public like Kate and Maggie did. So
Well, Leah, and now this is my opinion from what I have read, it looks like Leah kind of got what she wanted. Like she got
Yeah.
married, got the nice house she'd always wanted, and yeah, we can talk to ghosts, but my focus is just being in the niceness.
yeah, and I think you're right. I kind of agree with that. She says throughout the whole thing, she never accepted money for when she would do it herself. So, but she really didn't have a reason, like you said. She when she married Daniel Underhill, it was, she married into money.
Yeah.
And so she was pretty set. But her and her husband were
True believers.
spiritual. Oh yeah, and they were devoted. Like their lives were around that, just like any family, like it's like a Christian family. That's the basis of their family.
Yeah.
And that was the same for them. So those are kind of what they did. But in the Fox sisters seances, you would experience rapping, obviously, because that's the biggest thing they're known for is knocking, rapping. But then they would get touching. They could feel something touch. Objects would move and objects would levitate. So that was kind of like what would mainly happen in theirs. Now, seances throughout time, depending on mediums, and there was different kinds of mediums. Some seances involved slate writing. That's how they communicated. These are just different tools that different seances would use. But the reason I was going through the list on this is what the Foxes, that was their bread and butter, I guess is what you'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah, throughout time, there's gonna be other people using different tools. Like I said, slates. Some even use cabinets. That gets further, as far as I understand, is further on, and that really ties into spirit photography. And that's when you're getting more of these seances talking about apparitions and stuff showing up in their seances. The interesting thing about Fox Sisters is they don't really ever talk about apparitions. So it's never, when they do talk about apparitions that came in, they're more like about light, like forms of light, but not in the shape of a human, not what we would consider apparition.
Leah is kind of off with her husband doing these things. Kate and Maggie do some things as a pair for a little bit. But then Kate, when she is on her lonesome doing this on her own, that's her biggest contribution to spiritualism. But we can talk about that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, when these seances are going on, there's no TV. Telegraph is around. You could send messages pretty quick. Everybody's reading the newspaper. But your entertainment, after the newspaper's done, go to the seance.
Yeah.
So it's an easy way to make money if you're good at pulling some tricks. That's different. Pulling tricks is different. But it is women in the workforce.
Yeah. I guess you could look at it that way.
I'm trying to get Susan to pay attention. I don't know what she's doing.
Oh yeah, getting the rise out of her. Yeah.
I don't mean to equate mediumship and seances with prostitution, but there were absolutely people who felt that it was the same thing. It's attractive women doing these things, and men are coming in to see this stuff. And sexism is a thing. It's like, how are these women doing these things? They can't be magicians because they're women. Only men are magicians. We talk about how new this is. It's very interesting how it's socially being responded to.
Yeah.
And it's not just like the believers versus the skeptics. It's a lot of people for just a lot of different reasons. And plus, there's nothing. What else are they doing? Looking at the stars?
Yeah.
Let's go talk to ghosts. So, I don't know. I think that's real interesting.
Yeah. I agree.
So the skeptics, and there are people trying to disprove this stuff. Houdini's a fella who's doing that.
Yeah. Just to cut in for a second, Houdini wanted to believe.
I think so too.
I mean, he, outside of what we all know Houdini for, but he.
Should we talk about Houdini? How old are the people who are listening to our podcast, do you think?
I'm sure they've heard of Houdini.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Do you think
Eminem has a new album.
Eminem does?
Or a song
about
off
Houdini?
that album, Houdini.
So, but they may know it as a hip-hop track then.
Yeah. So, close enough, right?
Yeah, I think it's similar.
But he really, truly did want to believe in it.
Yeah.
Up all the way to his death.
Yeah.
But he did, I think it was his passion to find the truth.
Yeah.
But he stayed true to it though. He wanted it to be true. And so he was searching for the evidence, the proof.
Yeah.
Along that way, he's running into all kinds of fraud and charlatans and stuff. So it gets discouraging, but he stayed the path. And if he comes into a seance and it's really good, but then he sees something out of alignment or something that's, like, wait a minute, he wasn't afraid to expose it.
Sure.
So it comes off to spiritualists at the time that, he's just out there debunking everything. He doesn't believe. He doesn't want to believe.
Sure.
But that wasn't true. He wanted to believe, and that's why he was doing this. He was searching for the truth, but he wasn't going to break. He wasn't going to, just
cherry pick.
He wasn't just going to, be naive and fall into it.
It's the UFO poster in the X-Files office, that I want to believe.
Yeah, exactly. So he believed, like I say, he believed all the way to death, he searched for the truth until death. Even to the point where him and his wife had a secret phrase. I think it was 2 words. I don't have it in front of me, but there was 2 words, and him and his wife were the only people that knew this phrase. And what their deal was is that if he passed away before her, or she passed away before him, that they would try to communicate. And they would communicate by saying those 2 words. And then that's how they validated who was on the other side of the veil. And that it was true. That, like, I'm communicating to you.
Sure.
So when Houdini passes, his wife holds seances I could be wrong on this, and I don't know. Maybe Susan could look this up at
She's
some
real
point.
busy.
But I think Houdini died on Halloween. Like on the 31st. But I could be wrong. I don't know why I have that stuck in my head. He died on October 31st, 1926. So the reason I think I had that stuck in my head is because she would have seances every Halloween. And that went on without any luck for 10 years. There was, I don't know which year, there was one seance where the words came in. And so, yeah, like it's now, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And, but then later on, they come to find out that through some way, through the network, somebody figured
The code.
the formula for that code and got it right. And unfortunately, so then it was like, okay, well, it's not. So like I say, that goes for 10 years. And on the 10th year, this is funny. She says, and it's not a direct quote, but she says something along the lines that 10 years is long enough to wait for any man. So after 10 years, she had gave up. And she blew out a candle. This was interesting. She had a candle that had been lit after his death in, I guess we say 1926. And that candle, she kept that thing lit for 10 years. Now, I don't think the candle was the same, but she lit the candle.
That flame had been going
and kept that flame for that long.
It's a nice thought.
And then blew it out on the 10th year that it didn't happen. So interesting.
And that's, blowing out a candle probably happens at the end of a seance. Or no, maybe
if you want, I guess.
Writing them. Yeah, I don't know.
For Hollywood purposes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Hollywood for a minute. There are popular movies that have images of seances in them. And some of them I really like. I love the absurdity of the Insidious seances. Like, she puts that gas mask on and has to whisper through that tube.
Yeah.
I just think that is, like, it's the weirdest, but so cool. Like, you hadn't seen that before.
Yeah, I agree. Because there are several movies, and I can't think of, titles right now, but there's several movies that have seances, and it's really cool to see them bring their own adaptation of what they would see a seance, or that character would see a seance.
Sure.
And everybody's trying to do it different. You don't want just the mundane, we're going to sit in a circle, hold hands and stuff. So I think, Hollywood's trying to spice it up, and do their own thing. So that's why Insidious, I agree, was really cool. That's like one of my favorite movies.
Oh, yeah.
But great. I will tell you, one of my favorite all-time movies, and I think everyone should check it out, The Awakening.
Have I seen that movie? Tell me about The Awakening.
So I don't know the actress's name, but she basically, to keep it simple so we're not here all night, she's a researcher and she writes books, and she basically debunks seances, charlatans.
Sure.
So kind of like Houdini, type deal. The actress is Rebecca Hall. But it's a great movie. So the census, kind of like Houdini, she's searching for the truth. She wants it. But it's never like given. It's more of one of the Hollywood style where it's more shown than said.
Yeah.
So like you just know her husband has passed away in the war. There's just scenes that you take it in as watching, not being said.
Yeah.
But she gets called to school, a boarding school for boys.
I have seen this movie.
So yeah.
Yep.
So then she goes there, and because supposedly there's ghosts or haunting, and they bring her in to the guy that comes and gets her has to convince her to go. But he also, because she's heard it a million times. Oh yeah, you got to go. Yeah, right. So she's kind of towards the tail end of giving up hope. So anyways, I'm not going to give away the movie, but it's a great movie, and I think everybody should check it out. If you're interested in this stuff, it's a great movie.
And it's a period piece. World War II.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
40s.
kind of jumping out of Hollywood, unless you had some more to add in there.
Well, let's talk about. I always think of The Haunting in Connecticut because that's like that ectoplasm scene, and I don't know. It's really cool in that movie. I don't really remember anything about that movie except the morgue and the ectoplasm.
The ectoplasm. Yeah. Well, it's hard to forget that part because that's like on the cover. Of the movie.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of iconic. Like I think even people that haven't seen it or know the title of it have seen that cover art, anyways. But back in the day of DVDs.
And there's eventually evolving out of seances. There's spirit photography and stuff as well. And photography is a new technology that's being widely available. Yeah. So it's not a new technology, but it's now accessible. So getting all these spirit photographs and pictures of ectoplasma and ectoplasma. Okay. Slimer. It's fascinating, but it's like some of those pictures, remembering you're seeing a photograph for the first time, you're just amazed, number one, that you're seeing a picture of a human. This isn't hand-drawn. This is an image. This was science made this. And then here's some cheesecloth draping out of this gal's mouth.
But we're not here to say yay or nay
right.
on if there is or not, but yes, it is safe to say that a heavy majority of those photography is obviously cheesecloth. And my favorite are when they take the cheesecloth and they form it and then they put magazine cut. Well, I don't know if they were really magazines at the time, but they are like, they're like, they'll take the face of somebody and they'll cut it out like a mask, like if you were going to wear it as a cheesy Halloween mask, and they would put it to the cheesecloth so it looked like the ectoplasma was forming that human that had passed away.
Interesting.
So, I mean, it's interesting. That could be a whole episode, dude.
Of course, we could talk about all of these things, but we're talking about where it started with,
I think this is a good leadway into which way more than I know about Charles Livermore.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it kind of touches in there.
Yeah, well...
But we're on the subject of seances, too, so...
This is true.
Yeah.
So, and I mentioned Kate's contribution to spiritualism happened when she was working on her own. But let's... Should we talk about relationships first? Or should we go into...
Yeah, no, we can.
So we kind of mentioned Leah kind of got what she wanted. She's married into money, and she's just doing private seances for friends with her husband at her house.
Yeah. Later on. This is later on.
Later on.
Yeah. And while you're on that, just before you get the engine going.
Sure.
I feel like I keep stepping on your toes. Leah's pretty quick in this talk of relationships, but it is one of her keynotes of her relationships other than Underhill, who's, her last husband. She was married twice before. One was the last name Fish. We don't know anything about, there's nothing about that relationship. So, other than the name comes up, but notable is somebody that we have spoke about in previous episodes, and that's Calvin Brown, the family friend that came to protect them in the episode 1 or 2 that when we talked about that.
Yeah.
He falls. I don't know exactly what was wrong, but his health
rapidly
goes south. Yeah, and he is basically on his deathbed. Like they know it's coming, and his final wish is to marry Leah. It's a mutual final wish. And so they do get married, and she takes on his last name, Brown. So
it's kind of a business thing, right? It's like my protection is getting ready to end, but let's get married so you will be financially protected.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So So that was notable. And so removing my foot from your toe.
Well, what we're going to talk about?
Why don't you go into Kate? Yeah. Or is that who you're... Or we're talking about Maggie?
Maggie, yeah. Why is Kate by herself with Livermore is what I'm going to get at. So Maggie, at the age of 13?
Well, so today, when I was reading some more, getting refreshed, it's funny, you go back to this stuff and you find new things and it's exciting. But this is also one of those things where age and between books and stuff and reading accounts, everybody's stuff just doesn't line up.
Yeah.
It's so hard to line up ages and stuff with something that's well over 150 years old.
Yeah.
So,
and to point out, like, there are the people who have dug into the historical records for some of this stuff. They're like, Leah mentions the age of her younger sisters in Hydesville, but it's like Leah's has to get it wrong because we're looking at Margaret's stuff.
They have, yeah.
Yeah. And
so is Maggie's. Maggie's account of when she explains how old her and Kate were. She says she acts like they were really, really young, but they were in their teens. So the same thing in what you're going on here is when Maggie is I guess it's just safe for the story's sake that she is young.
Yeah. She's a teenager.
Significantly younger than who becomes the love of her life. And they do say 13, but when you if you do the math with what their known birth year and death year, and you take that, and then you take the math in that, when I figured it up today, it was more like she was 19. But everything kind of accounts that she was young, so I would say it was probably closer to 13. I think. Yeah. Anyways,
yeah.
For the sake of the story, she's young.
And the thing is, like, this is a different time. You get married real young at this time.
Maggie is at a hotel in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Well, in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. And this is 1852. And she's there in the parlor. She is holding sessions.
Okay.
Like they do, because they've been traveling around and doing that. In this hotel walks in Dr. Elijah Kane. He is actually a famous... he's a famous historical figure. He was an explorer. And he was, at the time, he was like a superstar explorer.
Yeah,
like
celebrity.
I mean, everybody knew him. He happens to be at the hotel, and he sees Maggie. And it's one of those, love at first sight type situations. But obviously she is young. But so when he introduces himself to her, the first thing he says to her, and I found this out today too, so this is why I'm excited.
Yeah.
The first thing introducing himself to her is, "This is no life for you, child."
Yeah.
So that's important into what we're going into.
Right.
So they talk in this hotel, and at first Maggie's not interested. That's not her focus.
Yeah.
She has her own stuff going on.
Trying to run a business here.
But Elisha, he's so engrossed with her right off the bat. And so they start writing back and forth. And so this relationship blooms out of that. As time goes on, they decide to marry. And when they get married, it's under a common law. And
I've read a couple of witnesses.
Yeah,
that saw
I've read, and I couldn't find it today, and I was trying to refresh. But as far as I remember, it was her mom, and I think Leah.
Yeah.
And some of the kids, Lizzie maybe.
And it was,
but none of his family.
The Fox family.
The Fox family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why and we should speak of his family. He is probably against Maggie doing this stuff because his family are very religious, very devout, and
well, he is. That's not an excuse for him. He's the same way.
Sure.
He is
He sends her to a boarding school.
Yeah, like he's not even what I would consider a skeptic. He's more of a like, no.
Yeah.
This is charlatan. This is all fraud.
Do you think it's that, or do you think it's women should have a certain place?
You know, the more I read about that guy and through his letters, it kind of comes off like that. I personally, his character really wasn't. I say character. He's a real person.
Yes.
But I really didn't care for him.
Sure.
From what I've read.
Well, and we are reading
I didn't
from
meet him either. So
we are reading from the perspective of the Fox sister as celebrities. True. They're the heroes of this story.
Yeah.
And he comes in and says, "No, you can't do this. I'm going to send you to school to show you how to be a proper lady, and then we're going to get married, and everything's going to be great."
Yeah. One of the reasons he sends her off to school, and actually school, it's a school in Pennsylvania that he sends her to.
Is it a Catholic boarding school?
I don't know. I'm not even going to pretend, but he does. She does eventually convert to Roman Catholic. So he does through several years span. During their relationship, he is. At first, it's a big struggle. Like there's several letters where he's sending to her because he's out exploring, and he's sending letters back to her. Really,
when we're talking exploring, we're not talking about traipsing through swamps and stuff. We're talking about countries putting up money to send him to Antarctica.
Yeah, he's going.
Like
yeah, and he is constantly on her about in the beginning getting rid of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
When he finally gets her out of that lifestyle, he does everything to keep her in what I would consider in check.
Yeah.
So he's constantly checking in on her and making sure that she's not straying away from what he's wanting.
Yeah.
And he also is trying to, at the same time, persuade Kate to leave mediumship. They didn't care. I think this is the small signs of what becomes a big quarrel between them and Leah. Leah is very devoted in what's going on. She's devoted in the movement, and you are not going to break her from this.
Yeah.
And I think he realized that, and he also saw it as Leah was controlling the two girls, that she was that they couldn't get from under her control. So he was really trying to get both girls out of the lifestyle. Sends her to school because Maggie the girls weren't going to school.
No,
they weren't
doing seances.
But they were doing more like what we call today homeschool. They were getting school. They
had
do
tutors.
some school, but but it's like a childhood Hollywood star nowadays where they're doing these movies, but on movie set between takes they have tutors and stuff. Yeah,
they got to log into a Chromebook or something.
Yeah, so
I would like to jump in here for a moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
It doesn't. The books that I've read and the info that I've read, it talks about Kate having crushes on tutors, and one tutor in particular was like, "Your girl's crazy. You got to get her away from me. Like, this is not good for her." But there's been really no talk of any serious suitors for Kate, which is I don't know. I think interesting. She's just so busy with her
Kate's
her
the
work.
Wild child.
That's speculation.
I know. Yeah,
she's the hot one though. Apparently.
Looking at the one photograph that they have,
there are two photographs.
Well, there's two of Kate that I know of. One when she's younger, her and Maggie together are younger, and then there is one of Kate by like a portrait of her. Well, it's a real picture, but she's older.
Okay, so anyway, so Dr. Kane. While he is convincing Maggie to leave this life behind, I'm sure she's conflicted because this is what she's grown up with. This is what her family does. This is her belief system, and there's just someone else that's like, come leave all that behind. Come be with me.
And he ultimately gets her to that, where
Yeah.
he wants, and I think also during this time, Kate went to England. Kate was, throughout this whole thing, out of the three girls, Kate was the most active and probably the most profitable off of mediumship. She was the most. Anyways, jumping back to Maggie, Dr. Kane gets his way, and she's converts to Roman Catholic, like we said, and then she's taking care of his aunt in Pennsylvania somewhere. I don't think it's Philadelphia, but it's near, while she's going to school. And Dr. Kane is exploring, and I think he's over in Europe. And his health. I think what they said is, I think he had heart issues, and was aware of these issues, but his health takes a turn. And the doctors, and I can't remember exactly all the details, but they basically tell him he needs to go to a warmer climate. And so he goes to Cuba.
Yeah.
I don't know this whole, there's more to this, but
I'm not going to argue with you because I don't know a lot, but I feel like he was in an Arctic climate, a very cold climate, and got some sort of lung infection. And they're like, you need to get to the tropics right now.
So when he goes to Cuba, this is when Margaret and Maggie learn of his
illness,
the issue. Yeah. So they are on their way to Cuba, and before they even make it to Cuba, he passes away.
Yeah.
So he's brought back to New York, and it's a big deal, because he is a celebrity.
He's a celebrity. He has a huge funeral,
and there was a huge funeral in what I would describe probably like when Queen Elizabeth passed away. I mean, it's a big deal for the city.
Well, you bring that up. Lincoln's assassination, his funeral was modeled after Dr. Elisha Kane's funeral.
That's a good point.
So,
I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
The funeral was based on this famous explorer celebrity's funeral.
Isn't that insane?
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Not really, because it's like...
Well, different times.
It is. It's different. I mean...
Different times.
Well, I'm just thinking like... And I'm not going to use any current celebrities, but say a famous celebrity dies suddenly. There's this huge service that's... caters to all the fans and all of these things as a meaningful send-off, and then suddenly within the next year another big celebrity dies, and it's like, well, we're going to do it. So it's one of those things where it's like you can see how they would be similar, you know? But it's just I'm trying to make the point of how these people were viewed. It was a big deal. Yeah.
Upon Dr. Kane's death, Maggie is heartbroken. I mean, this is the love of her life. She falls back on mediumship. Yeah. But during this, Dr. Kane's family, they are unaware that he was married to her.
Right.
So...
Well, do you think they're unaware, or do you think...
Well, I think they knew they were together because they were against it. Yep. And they were constantly writing him, saying, she's not good enough for our family. Yes. We're prominent and blah, blah, blah.
Right. And which, to me, would explain his efforts to get her into a boarding school and get her up to their standards.
To their standards. Yeah. And now you can see why I really didn't care for his character too much. But
this is a possession. This is not a person.
This is when the family comes in and they're taking his estate. But Maggie is like saying, hey, we're married. Yeah. My last name is Kane. Yeah. Like, we got married. And the family is not acknowledging this because, first off, they weren't there to witness it.
Sure.
And it was done under common law. Yeah. So they feel like she has no right to any of his estate.
Sure.
So this ends up going to court.
Yeah.
Maggie, her proof in court is she has tons of love letters between her and Dr. Kane throughout the years. And in these letters, that is proven that they are married. And so when she takes them to court and this is brought upon the family, now they're kind of like, oh no. Yeah, we do got so what they do is they end up settling. In court. They do end up settling, and what the agreement is that the family of Dr. Kane is to what you would say stipend. For monthly payments to Maggie of her portion that was agreed.
By the courts.
Yes. The family this is still hard to swallow.
They don't want to do this.
They
want nothing to do with her.
In particular, his brother. And he actually, for some reason, the brother has a lot of control over the estate. And so he's making it very difficult on Maggie getting that money. And what ends up happening is the money cuts off one day.
Well, and before that happens, we should talk about she gets this money as long as she never publishes these love letters.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I almost walked all over that.
These love letters that were the proof that got her this court settlement are put in a agreed upon caretaker's possession, and he stores these love letters for safekeeping. And as long as the stipend keeps being paid, letters don't get published. But yes, the family does fall on some financial hardship, supposedly. And this is one of those things. It's like they're all in everything I've read. They're portrayed as the villains. They're the bad guys in this story. So I don't know. But financial hardship falls upon them allegedly, and they cannot pay the stipend.
So then the love letters are returned. And then Maggie, also in the same boat, going through rough times.
She never gets over her husband's death.
Right. Yeah. All the way to her grave. She's mourning his death for forever. But she ends up publishing the love letters in a book.
And it's a bestseller.
Anything but. The book, and you can read this book as well, The Love Life of Dr. Kane. It was published in 1866. This is 9 years after his death. And so by this time, the book didn't do well because over 9 years span, they've moved on. Kind of like what you were talking about with celebrities. 9 years is too long of a span to come out with this and be shocking. So the book never does well, and so the financial support that she was holding on to from that, it ends up failing. So like we said, she had returned to mediumship, so she was doing mediumship. Towards the end of the Fox sisters' lives, Kate was really the only one that was going strong. Since Maggie had dipped out for a while of that lifestyle, I think she kind of just lost that fame that was with her.
And we should also point out that when that book is published, when the love letters are published, Leah Underhill, at this point, cuts off both sisters, cuts off contact. Like, Leah is not talking to Kate or Maggie anymore.
Yeah, one of the reasons is because, well, first off, Leah has the life that she wants, but also Kate and Maggie are kind of going through rough times, of course, but they're also at this point drinking a lot. And they have drinking problems and financial problems. Leah actually houses Maggie for sure. I don't know about Kate, but she does take Maggie in several times throughout years to take care of her, but it's just always she would relapse, and then it would be she'd get back on her feet, and then it would be and I think Leah just gets tired of it as well. So this is where the two sisters and Leah kind of this relationship starts breaking apart.
Well, we haven't talked about Kate's stuff yet.
Oh yeah, we have. No, I'm just kidding. What? No, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
So we've talked about Leah got married, got the life she wanted. Maggie is trying to improve her life to be good enough for her husband's family, in my opinion, and then her husband dies. Kate, on the other hand, like we mentioned earlier, doesn't really have any suitors. She is doing mediumship all the time. We should talk about her with Charles Livermore, and that stuff is so fascinating to me, and I wish I could find his diary, but I cannot seem to find it anywhere. So Charles Livermore is a businessman, and his wife passes away. And so he is very interested in spiritualism, and he seeks out Kate and starts doing these sessions with Kate, these seances. And he visits her over and over and over again. And we mentioned earlier where apparitions are not something that normally happens at their seances, but they do for Charles Livermore with Kate. This is where those apparitions start happening. Like sometimes they'd see a ghostly hand or something somewhere in some of their seances. But with Charles, with Mr. Livermore, his wife, Estelle, I think is her name.
I think you're right. Yep.
Full body apparition. And I know I talked about this in a previous episode, but he talks in his diary about buzzing sounds that he can hear when the spirit materializes. Now, I can buzz with my lips. You know, I knew how to play the trumpet. But I don't know. It's just very fascinating to me because there's all these natural sounds at this time. I talked about this before, but how do you describe a sound that's totally new to you? You know?
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me. But yeah, a lot of luminous lights are happening during these things as well. And Kate really kind of starts to view herself as Estelle, I guess. So Kate's like 35 years old and thinks, here's this widower. In my opinion, this is my theory, and she's kind of in love with this guy.
Does it involve big chickens?
It does not involve big chickens this time. But no, I think she's got it pretty bad for Charles Livermore. And so she keeps doing these seances with him where they keep conjuring his beautiful wife and all these nice messages and all this stuff. But then one day he up and gets engaged to a much younger woman. And Kate is like, well, all right, guess it's time for me to get married. And
is this when she marries
Henry
Jenkins?
Yes.
My notes say they got married in 1872.
1872.
They had 2 boys.
Another thing that's happening with Kate, there is a scientist named William Crookes, and he is fascinated by this mediumship. He is important for radiology. He's known for spinthariscopes. It's kind of the concept that it's how smoke detectors work. There is a piece of radioactive bit in there, and it decays, so it's constantly shooting off particles. And there is a film. It looks like fireworks. Those particles look like fireworks on this film, and that's also why your smoke detector is only good for 25 years or something. Probably less than that. It's probably 10 years. Check with your local.
I'm always changing them damn batteries.
It's not the batteries. There is radioactive decay, so they literally will not work regardless.
Oh, the actual detector goes out?
The detector goes bad because it works by radiation.
Look that up, Susan.
Yeah. Check with your local fire department for smoke detector rules. Anyway, it's shooting off these particles, and that film that looks like fireworks is being monitored. And smoke would get in the way of the particles lighting that film up, and that's what triggers your smoke detectors that have the radioactive element. Okay. I don't know how modern smoke detectors work.
Oh, we got info coming in. Oh, every 10 years.
10 years.
Dang,
yeah.
Tyler.
Okay.
You should go work for the fire department.
Okay.
You got the mustache.
So anyway, some sort of tube. Look, this is all brand new stuff, but he's a scientist, okay? Just take my word for it, he's a scientist. It's impressive. Also, if you want to see a spinthariscope, I have one. It will eventually go bad because it will decay fully, but they're real cool. What were we talking about? I started smoking something different here. We're talking about Kate and her relationship, but what she's up to. Talking about William Crooks. I got really sidetracked. Also, look up his photo because that's what I want to look like.
Of who again? I'm sorry.
William Crooks, the scientist.
Yeah.
He's got those little bitty glasses.
Does, yeah.
He's got.
I actually just saw him today.
The beard,
yeah.
But his mustache is waxed hard and points way out. Anyway, life goals.
Dude, I know. It would have been great to meet him.
Oh yeah. We could have talked about what products he uses to make his mustache look so good.
The poor guy, though.
He couldn't see.
Yeah, that's exact. Man, we think alike. I was just about to say that was one reason they were all like, his credibility wasn't very strong because everybody said, well, he can't see.
Yeah.
He's just.
A lot of the criticism, and it got more into spirit photography, but he started looking into this stuff, spiritualist with these mediums. But yeah, there was some critic with spirit photography. There was someone who was like, yeah, his eyesight's so bad he can't tell a living woman from a dead woman or something like that.
From a cheesecloth.
Because there was... Yeah. I mean, what else are we doing? You know, how creative, how wonderful. Human ingenuity for scams, it just amazing. Blows my mind.
It is amazing.
Anyway, I don't. Why don't we just do legitimate stuff? It doesn't matter.
You know, charlatanism.
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 Charlottesville.
If you think about it, man, that was like a art form in itself.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Okay. So most of what we know about Kate's mediumship and seances, at least what I have seen, has been from Crooks. His notes say that heavy tables moved in full light with no one touching it. There was a fan that circled the table, and of course we're not talking about a ceiling fan, we're talking about a handheld fan.
Yeah.
But he didn't use the word levitate, but it circled the table without anyone touching it. Glowing orbs that floated, sighting and touching of spectral hands, and then spirit writing. Kate did a lot of spirit writing. Mm-hmm. And he was most impressed by Kate being able to give a message with automatic writing to one person while delivering an unrelated message via raps to a second person and converse freely with a third person on an unrelated topic. So she was really multitasking. I don't know. I don't have it in my notes here, but I think I've read something about her being able to write with both hands, right and left hand, for these spirit writings. So while Crooks was investigating Kate, he had these other mediums with him as well. And I think the guy's name is David Holmes.
No, there's two notable ones I have in my notes.
Yeah.
Is he worked a lot with Florence Cook.
Okay.
And then the guy you're talking about is Daniel Douglas Home.
Yeah, okay. So that dude is famous because he would levitate. So during his seances, he would float around. And there is one account of him floating out an east window of a house and coming back in the west window.
Nice.
Floating in both times. And have you ever seen Mr. Boogedy's Bride of Boogedy?
No.
Well, Disney TV movie. Dude gets possessed, but he's like floating down a hallway, just kidding. Because he's a jokester, but it's like, there's clearly something weird going on here.
That kind of reminds me of, he's floating on that second floor window, and he's like trying to get his friend to let him in. But the friend's not letting him in because obviously he's levitating.
Right, yeah. Yeah. I thought you were talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, where dude's like at the ledge on the second floor.
Hey, it all works.
It does. It's the same stuff. But anyway, Crooks was like, that levitating stuff, that doesn't impress me. It's Kate that impresses me.
That's interesting.
And he was just so fascinated by these sounds. He just could not figure out where they were coming from. And he says that Kate only needed to, quote, place her hand on any substance, end quote, for sounds to ring out, loud enough to be heard rooms away. He said the substance is tested, so I'm guessing he's just like, touch this thing. He's got listed a tree, glass, stretched iron wire. I don't know what that looks like, how it's stretched or anything like that. A tambourine, that makes sense. The roof of a cab, and the floor of a theater. And all she had to do was put her hand on it, and percussive knocks would ring out. And you don't need to see to hear the knocks, but then, if whoever's right in front of you that you're staring at has got a hammer in their pocket,
Yeah.
But there's no indication of that, because there are other people around as well. It's not just him.
Yeah. He also did a lot with Florence Cook, and Florence Cook could manifest a apparition by the name Kate King. I think is what the name was. I could be.
And this is where this apparition...
Yeah, Katie King. Yeah.
Katie King. This apparition appeared a lot with that medium, right?
Yes, yeah. And
that's where the spirit photography comes in as well, with that apparition.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, if I'm not mistaken, later on she is debunked. So it kind of kills Crook's... amongst other things, credibility.
And this is something the author of the book, Talking to the Dead, points out. She is like, sometimes it just gets easier to explain things away than consider the possibilities. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those things. If you're looking for a way to debunk it, like that's out there.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a reason to believe it, there's reasons to do that as well.
You want to hear a small little story?
Sure.
Referring to Crooks?
Yeah. Crooks the dude, or just regular Crooks?
Yeah, like, I thought we were talking about burglars. Anyways, no. I'll make it quick. A few years ago, we were in Kansas, and my wife's aunt owned an antique store. And we went into the antique store because we love antiques, and we love antique shopping because we're old people.
Yeah, I understand.
And we were about to leave, and I was going through all the books because I like old books. And I'm just kind of, scanning through these books and their titles and stuff. And this book sticks out to me. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. So I pull it out, and it's his book, The Research. I don't know the title. I'd have to look it up. But anyways, I found that book in that antique store, and it became like my prized possession because it's the book from that age.
Yeah.
And I'd been interested in spiritualism, but that really kicked it off to where I am now.
Yeah. Well, and if we want to talk about daimonic reality, which I keep telling you to read that book by Patrick Harper, talk about all these, you can interpret literally everything around you as a sign. And all of these talks about fairies and ghosts and aliens, that's all the same thing. It's this weird outside part of human nature or human experience. But anyway, you found that book, and here you are today in this podcast, and how long, like, that is a daimonic story.
Yeah.
And it was fate.
It's pretty cool.
The William Crook stuff is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He's a respected scientist who then loses credibility by believing in spirits.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kate, age 35, gets married to Henry Dietrich Jenkin. Yeah. He's a friend of Crook's, and they got married. Kate and Henry got married on December 14th, 1872. Kate's siblings did not attend her wedding. It was in Europe, but Leah was separated from her younger sisters at that time. Supposedly, during the wedding ceremony, there were knocks all over the place. The spirits were
That's cool.
very, very pleased. It was great. It was also assumed that Margaret Fox, Kate's mother, the Fox sisters' mother, who had passed, was in attendance. According to the author of Talking to the Dead, some guests reported seeing the banquet table full of food levitating in the area. Right after Kate gets married, they start having a family. She gets pregnant. They have 2 kids. I am not quite sure who William Stainton Moses is. But from what the author of Talking to the Dead has found, he provides a description of Kate's voice, and he describes it as rapid, sharp, with a slight Yankee accent. And that is in spring of 1873.
I like you giving that little piece of information because I didn't know that, even though I've read that book. So,
well, a decade ago.
Yeah. But it makes me want to read it again, so now it's on my list again. What I'm saying on that is you don't hear a lot of those kind of descriptions of the girls. So
yeah.
That's really cool because no one really describes, like, that gives me closer to what kind of or a mental image of her.
Yeah.
You know, we see pictures.
Yeah.
But now you're talking about her voice and how someone would describe her accent. And so now you're like kind of, it's like another puzzle piece to slide in there.
And that's the thing that I always want to push in these things as well. Like, these are people. They have needs, wants, and desires, you know, just like you and me, you know, except I guess we weren't putting audio of voices on wax cylinders for them at this time, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well.
so we're talking about Kate and her contribution to spiritualism. Let's talk about some important timeline stuff. In 1861, Kate is 24 and she lived with her parents. She visited Maggie often, but Maggie was deep into alcoholism at this point. So this is her on her own, making her biggest contribution to the movement. And this is just what's going on in America. 1859, John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. His intent was to start a slave rebellion with that. But, you know, there's the song, John Brown's Body. Anyway, Abraham Lincoln is elected in 1860. The Confederacy began in February of 1861, and the war between the states began in April 1861. So all of that's going on while Charles Livermore is having his interactions with Kate. His wife, named Estelle. The war made Charles Livermore extremely successful. Whatever his business was, he made a lot of money during the conflict. Lee surrenders to Grant, April 1865, but the rebellion is still going on till 1866. 5 days after surrender, Lincoln is assassinated. And like we mentioned before, his funeral is modeled after Elisha Kent Kane's. Before his assassination, Lincoln is actually, he is...
his endorsement?
Yeah, he is endorsed. Endorsed? No. Yes. Yeah.
For a second term.
For a second term. So there is the first Spiritualist Conference. It is the National...
Well, it's called something else, and they're in Chicago for 3-day convention. And this is actually where the, what you're saying, the National Spiritualist Association of Churches forms.
Okay.
During this convention. So,
okay.
And yes, they're endorsing Abraham Lincoln for a second term.
Yep. That was in Chicago, summer of 1864. Yeah. And Lincoln wasn't there, but there was a whole lot of talk about Lincoln. And not only was Lincoln not there, the Fox sisters were not at this convention of spiritualists. So anyway, Estelle Livermore last appears through Kate in April of 1866. He, like I said, the war was very good for him. So he retires, and not caring about what anybody thinks about him anymore, because he's got all the money he needs, fully dives into spiritualism. And he remains friends with Kate for the rest of their lives.
Cool.
Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, came to a lot of Kate's sessions and was just fascinated with what she was doing. By the summer of 1871, everyone is aware now that Kate is an alcoholic. So things are rough.
Yeah, we're kind of in a downward spiral now. Yeah.
Some of it's social and some of it's just choices, consequences. So let's go back to Maggie in her grief and alcoholism and needing money because the stipend went away.
This is kind of the portion of the episode where it starts getting into the darker times, which I think
sad.
we've already touched base. But yeah,
Nothing
sad.
lasts forever.
So we're going to kind of dive into the downfall of the sisters, starting with Maggie. Maggie, she's struggling financially, fighting alcoholism. She is approached by a reporter, and at this time she's in New York. Kate's still in England. So she's approached by a reporter, and she is offered $1,500 to expose her methods.
In this time
no
period,
one knows why. Yeah, I mean,
in this time period, $1,500 is equivalent to about $50,000.
about $50,000. Yeah.
In 2024 money.
Yeah. So that puts that in perspective. Now, it depends on how you look at it and what you believe. No one really knows why, but she does take this offer.
Yeah. I'll tell you the story.
Yep. And then ends up doing before the public performance that I'm about to talk about, she actually does write a article that she publishes in the New York Herald. And in this, she's basically like the reporter wanted her to do. I don't know if that reporter was for New York Herald, but if you want, that kind of lines up.
Sure.
But so she does this article pretty much announcing spiritualism as a fraud from her point of view anyways. Crack it open. Shortly after she announces this publicly, Kate comes in from England. Not for this. She's coming back, and she has no idea of this. But when she arrives, she finds out, and then she's instantly on board with Maggie. And so they do a public performance, which it says Maggie did the performance. Kate was there, but Maggie did the performance. And she demonstrated how the wrappings were made in front of about 2,000 people.
Amazing.
They were performing at New York Academy of Music.
Going back to Rochester, Corinthian Hall. That place could hold 400 people, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what you were saying. Yeah.
But it was only half full.
Yeah.
So at their first public display, 200 people.
200 people.
Maybe. And then to see how they've been faking it this whole time.
Yeah.
2,000 people show up.
Yeah. Which this public announcement leads into a book being written, which we have discussed. But the book is The Death Blow to Spiritualism. It's published in 1888 by Reuben Briggs Davenport. The book is mainly Maggie's account and Kate's account of how they brought this, fraud, basically.
Yeah. Let's call it entertainment.
Yeah.
It was a form of entertainment.
So this is when there's a major fallout between, it was already, the ties between Leah and the two sisters
bad before.
was already bad, but in this basically broke the chain. One of the reasons is Kate had two sons, and she's fighting alcohol, and Leah doesn't feel that the boys are safe under her.
In Kate's care, yeah.
And also at this point, Mr. Jenkins has passed away.
Yeah.
So
Kate is a widow.
as I take it, the state stepped in and took the two boys from her.
Yeah.
So that definitely fueled the fire as well. So during this whole confession thing, they do make some money off of this book. So they're living okay, Maggie and Kate, but they're in a downward spiral with alcoholism. Their health is deteriorating from this.
Yeah.
Things are rough. And so what ends up happening is Maggie, in 1889, which is a year later,
just a year after the
she
book,
tries to retract this confession.
Mm-hmm.
And then she attempts to return the mediumship.
Yeah.
For financial, for income. But as you can expect, no credibility now.
Yeah.
Like, none.
You told everybody you were making it up, and now you're trying to do it again.
She's destroyed her whole reputation as far as the spiritualist world.
Yeah.
So that ends up failing big time. Really, it's just going to get to the darkest part, which is the deaths.
Yeah. Maggie tries to become a medium again just a year after that book comes out in 1889. Well, in 1890, Leah passes. And Leah Fox Fish Brown Underhill.
Yep. Had a lot of names.
Yeah. So, we were just in a dinner theater production, and one of the characters in that play had 4 last names or whatever. But the joke in that was that all of her husbands had died at the dinner table.
Yeah.
That's not how.
That is funny, yeah.
Leah's husband.
No,
passed,
wait. yeah. The only common thing about that was the names, or how many names.
So it's not, usually death isn't funny.
No.
I guess sometimes it is, but no, she passes. It's just funny that she's got a lot of names.
Depends on who you're communicating with.
That's right, yeah.
Yep, so like Tyler says, the Leah passes away in 1890. So Kate dies in 1892 in her home from heart complications that were possibly induced by alcoholism, which,
yeah.
So Maggie ends up less than a year later in 93. Her health also declines, more than likely from alcoholism as well. When her health declines, she actually can't take care of herself, and she ends up staying with a spiritualist friend by the name of Emily Ruggles. It's Ruggles. And then that's where she ends up passing away, is in her home. Maggie and Kate are both buried in Cypress Hills Cemetery, which is in Brooklyn, New York. And Leah is buried also in Brooklyn, New York, but she is in the Greenwood Cemetery along the rest of the Fox family.
With the rest of the Fox family.
Yeah.
That's so wild. So, like,
it's kind of weird, isn't it?
They're the kids they had first, the first part of their marriage, were completely separate from the kids from the second part of their marriage.
It's interesting.
Wild.
Yeah. So that kind of ends the Fox era.
Yeah. I have some notes here that I think it's just interesting to think about. Like, why would spiritualism decline as a movement? What would make it less popular? And there's a lot of discussion on this. But life expectancy, the infant mortality rate in particular, all of these things are improving. Better sanitation, better health. Just, it's easier to get books out there. It's easier to spread knowledge. There's the telegraph. Things are just getting better. We just keep advancing. Of course, people die, but we're not surrounded by it constantly.
That was definitely a different time in the Victorian age.
Yeah.
And also death was looked at way different from rituals today.
Oh, yeah.
Not saying that there's not still some of that ritual going on, but it was just a whole different time. But like you say, I think the mortality rate was higher, obviously. So, and that's what contributes to that big difference there. But,
and then, we mentioned that convention in Chicago that went on for 3 days. But there wasn't really a big organization with great leadership. There wasn't a big central unit. It was just kind of this mass of people believing this stuff. So it's just hard to keep building when everybody's just like, no, this is just what we do.
Yeah, this is just what we do. It's spiritualism is interesting in the fact that it does end up growing, but it's a little not your traditional, I guess, way, whereas other religions kind of structured. It's kind of a different route, but it's still structured, and it still goes on today. There's still the Church of Spiritualism.
Yeah.
It's just a little different. Some things have changed, obviously, over the decades.
Who publishes the Book of Prayers or whatever it is?
The books I have,
Yeah.
those,
Yeah.
that's the this association is still going strong.
You can contact them and get their literature.
They have a website. Yeah, you can call. It's funny because you have to call them. You can't order it online. You have to call them, and then you just tell them. They call them manuals.
Yeah,
and they're interesting. If you're really into this subject, I think you should reach out to at least get your hands on one of their manuals. I got one from, I want to say 30s, but I think it's newer than that. And then I also have one from 2013, I think is the one that I called and ordered because I was curious.
Sure.
And the other one I found at an antique store, I think.
Yeah.
And so, and it's basically kind of just, it's a manual. It goes through all kinds of stuff like funeral rituals, wedding rituals, stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting.
And just to remind everyone, it's spiritualism is kind of, I mean, it is based on Christianity.
That's something that I think a lot of people don't put hand in hand.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that until I was reading your manual. That manual you had, it's
very close to Christian based.
It's just open to the idea. I would say it's kind of like the Catholic belief in intercession of the saints. You can pray to the saints who then appeal on your behalf to the Trinity, God. So anyway, it's one of those. But these saints are former loved ones who are here hanging out with you as well. So,
One thing that did come out of spiritualism during the movement is a little place called Lilydale.
Oh, yeah.
In New York. It formerly was known as the City of Light. It was established in 1879. It started as a camp for spiritualists. They would gather and meet. Then it just, over time, became a actual town, what we know now as Lilydale.
Yeah. And
their whole purpose of Lilydale was to further the science and philosophy and religion of spiritualism. So it's a big part of spiritualism. I think actually that's the headquarters of the Spiritualist Church Association.
Well, it's also interesting because in these books that you have of what is the record, the Fox what record?
So yeah, and you saying that brings up a good point and I was going to say this earlier when you were talking, you were real heavy on Kate. Kate is very fascinating.
Yeah.
And like we said, she's probably the most prominent of the Fox sisters as far as mediumship. And I almost think later on we should do an episode on her.
Just about her.
Yeah. Because like what you're referring to is the Fox Taylor record.
Yeah. Oh,
and I have not, I got the 2 books, but I have not indulged in them, and I am going to.
But when you open those up, there's a little sticker in there from a Lilydale
shop.
Yeah. And it's weird because
it's from their library in the town.
So I was looking for a copy for myself because I'm interested. And in all of these pictures that I was seeing, of course, the book just looks just like yours, but they all got that little sticker.
It's almost like a stamp of certification or something like that. Yeah. Approved. I think it says something about Lilydale authorized or approved or something. I might be wrong on that. But it is cool. That's a cool little thing you bring up. But yeah, those 2 books I haven't indulged in yet, but the Fox Taylor record is a book by itself, which is just strictly
what happened at seances.
Seances. Notes from seances that they had, kind of like Kate worked with crooks. She worked with this family, the Taylors, and they recorded everything.
The Taylors had a kid who was 10 years old when the seances started, and he was writing down all of these. Isn't that right? It's his. That's why it's the Taylor record, because it's his.
Him, and it's weird. I can't find too much on him. I'm still trying, but I feel like what I've learned is I think it's a husband and wife, and I think the wife compiled the records. So that book she is announced as the author, and then Kate Fox and the Taylor Report, I think, is the title of that one, and that book is by Mr. Taylor, and that is a biography of Kate Fox and the records.
Okay.
So I'm excited to get into those, and that's why I say we should tickle the idea of that.
Yeah, we'll revisit that.
Yeah, if everybody's interested still.
Yeah, we'll see. So we're talking about Lilydale. Lilydale is kind of a tourist attraction now. It has its seasons, and you go there for tarot readings, seances.
Well, it's I think what I read today about Lilydale. And there's lots of stuff about Lilydale, and I think that's another avenue that I suggest everybody go down as well. It's really, really cool, a really cool town, a lot of history, but it's very unique. It is a gated community. I think what I read today, there's 160 private residences there. I've read about this before, that you can't just live in Lilydale.
Yeah.
Like, there's a process.
Yeah.
Most of the people in Lilydale are spiritualists, and they are also, there's a heavy community of mediums, and they do practice mediumship. And during the seasons that the community is open to outside, there's several establishments throughout the town that you can go to different mediums. Some of them do it out of their houses, and they have a library and a museum, I think. And a lot of that is Hydesville based, obviously, because that's the beginning of their...
And they moved the house from Hydesville to Lilydale.
To Lilydale, yes. And unfortunately, they had moved the house from its foundation to Lilydale. And then I think in the 1950s, there was a fire and it burned down. And they did recover some items that they had in it, because they kind of had it set up like a museum type system. But they did save some items from that are on display at the museum there in Lilydale. And then the foundation, I can't remember if we talked about it when we were talking about the school kids finding the peddler stuff, but the foundation is still there in the original location, and they have actually built a building on top of that foundation to protect it and preserve it. And you can look, like, there's windows all the way around the little building that's built over it, and it's a historical site that you can visit and look at the foundation where it's sat. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, all of these things kind of go together, but if you're into Ouija boards and stuff like that, this is all what we're talking about. You know, this is spirit communication.
Yep.
And we haven't talked about Ouija boards, but the Fox sisters, that wasn't part of it, and I don't know enough history about it.
Yeah, like you say, it wasn't a heavy tool used by the Fox sisters. There were other mediums during the time that used that, but later on,
I'm sure it
because they were really just spirit boards and
talking boards.
You know, in reality, the Fox sisters used the alphabet.
Yeah, it was knocking with the alphabet. So that's really a beginning basis for slate writing, or not slate writing, but spirit boards. And then, and I think they were commonly known as spirit boards up until whenever it became the game.
And that was actually a Parker Brothers board game that came out in the 60s or something like that.
And now it's Hasbro.
Yeah. So, you can still communicate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the ones today, you can get glow in the dark based on your favorite movies.
You just go to Etsy, man.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
get all kinds of
Yeah.
planchettes, or what is that how you pronounce it?
Planchette, yeah.
Planchettes?
I got a Lovecraftian planchette off Etsy.
Yeah.
Because I went to the Spirit Board Historical Society and got one of their big wooden boards, but it didn't come with a planchette. Now, this stuff never works for me in my experience. I am unable to communicate.
You know, we have a history with Ouija boards.
Yeah.
Me and you, or you and I. A few stories that come to mind is it was my birthday, and I had you guys over and talked to my mom into, because we were talking about Ouija boards or something like that, and my mom said, I still have a Ouija board. And I go, you had a Ouija board? And she said, oh yeah. And she said, I think it's still at Grandpa's house.
And we made your parents drive
you remember we drove
there.
all the way to
Yes.
to my grandpa's house was in the country outside of a town called Dover, and it's probably, what would you say, about 9 miles
10,
away,
yeah,
or
9 or
something
10
like
miles,
that,
yeah.
less than 10 miles away from where we live. And we drove. Remember, it was late that night too.
Yeah.
And we went to my grandpa's house and in search for this Ouija board. And I just remember it being dark, and we were looking with flashlights and stuff, because the house, my grandpa had already moved to Kingfisher. So it was basically just a storage on the farm. And we found the Ouija board in a closet somewhere, and brought that back and messed around with it. But like Tyler says, nothing ever came of it. But I still have it, the Ouija board. It's cool, and it is actually probably one of the first one Parker Brothers. It's
an early
like
one,
dated in 70s or 60s. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Another story of a Ouija board comes, and I don't know if you remember this, but we were at a buddy of ours' house, and he
Made us leave the room.
Well, but you do remember we were playing with the Ouija board, and and his two older brothers, knew that we were doing that, and they went outside of the house and started hitting the windows and stuff. I remember that. Yeah.
And then they came in to play with it, and
then they acted like
yeah.
And
one of them, I feel like, was a believer. They had some strange experiences of their own. So, and that's we can talk about those all night. Another time we'll talk about spirit boards. So mediumship still goes on to get today. There's mental mediumship. That's kind of the clairvoyance and telepathy. And then there's the physical mediumship. That's the noises that you hear, table levitations, apparitions.
I think I've told you this story, but my wife, she likes to watch those ghost hunting shows and stuff, and mainly for entertainment, but because they can be silly. They can. But there was one episode of these two guys that ghost hunt, and they were investigating like all of them, investigating a famous house that's haunted. I come home and she's like, babe, you have to see this episode. And she knows how I feel about those shows. And I was just kind of rolling my eyes like, whatever. And she's like, no. She said, this one you need to watch. So we watched it. And I think it's the first episode I've ever seen of any ghost hunters that actually like kind of intrigued me, because those shows always have mediums on, and it's always the same setup, the same format. I think that's just why I don't get interested. But this one was unique in the way that they had two mediums there, and their form of mediumship is not like your everyday mediumship. When they would stand face to face and hold hands, that's how they would communicate with the spirits. But they did kind of like the Fox sisters, where they would start to hear rappings, and they would use the alphabet, and basically the lady would just start saying the alphabet and until they would hear a knock, and so then they would ask questions, and then that's how they spelled. So it's really
That's
close
the Fox sisters.
to the Fox sisters, and I thought that was really unique. And
Seeing
it's
it in
not
the
something
modern-
you see all the time.
Yeah.
And, it's up to you to believe if it's true or not. But
Would
I
you
thought
call
that was
that-
pretty cool.
Yeah, back to basics. you know?
It was cool in that video. The minute they started holding hands, just a few seconds later, you start hearing footsteps coming into the room.
Yeah.
It's time to party.
Connection's been made.
Yeah, so it was cool. It was a cool thing.
And we've been to some movie screenings of purported ghosts caught on camera.
Yes. Yeah.
Go and see them in a old theater.
That was a cool experience.
It was. So anyway, we're interested in this stuff. This is cool stuff. And then what else after spiritualism? Madame Blavatsky came to the U.S. in 1873 and founded the Theosophical Society in 1875. That stuff is really occultism type thing. She wrote the Book of the Law, I think. I've got her books in here somewhere. There was a hierarchy involved where, unlike we were talking about, why did spiritualism decline? There wasn't a strong organization of leadership, whereas Theosophy did have that strong structure, and it was very esoteric and had aspects of spiritualism and then Eastern mysticism. So it was talking to ghosts, but also all of these other things. A lot of in the modern age, we would call them New Age ideas. And the Civil War drove interest in American spiritualism, and World War I drove the interest in England. There were public debates in England about spiritualism. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, was a spiritualist.
Big spiritualist.
Good friends with Houdini, and kind of wrecked their friendship.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what we said about Houdini. He was really passionate, and he really wanted to believe. I don't think he stopped reaching for hope, but he was losing hope.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they were going two different ways.
Yeah.
Houdini was losing hope, and Doyle was like
You can't convince me
ramping it up. Yeah, and I think they were both so alike in their hard-headedness that they ended up butting heads.
Well,
man, that is.
Have we said all we'd like to say?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
there's more to say.
Oh, there's always more to say.
I bet we've got a website in the show notes that I keep referencing. If you would like to share your stories with us, send us an email through throughtheprairiesmoke@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Our producer would love to hear from you. Might be interested in show ideas. If there's anything
Yeah, we're always open to ideas, yeah.
We have some things lined up that we're excited about. But yeah, I think this is a good wrap up for just talking about how we talk about these possibilities, and we don't want to judge anything. It doesn't matter to me if these ladies talk to ghosts or not, but I think them as human beings are very interesting, and I like thinking about the possibility of spirit communication.
I think everybody, whether they admit it or not, deep down have that little twinkle of hope.
Sure.
Because I can't.
Well, that feeling that there's
for
something else.
But I think we've talked about that in one of the episodes where that's just always going to be a question of mankind.
Yeah.
What is beyond death?
What comes next?
Yeah. Like you say, it's fascinating, and it was a historical movement.
I try to look for the fun in all of these things, not poking fun at it, not making fun of things, but like, if these are humans, if these are spirits that have passed on, like, I would hope to retain my personality. I'm going to be pulling pranks all day long. I'm going to be teasing people all day long. I think that's something that we lose, and when looking at pictures of spirit photography and stuff like that, it's just, instead of looking at that and thinking, well, that's fake or that's phony, like think about what it could be and what it meant to those people who bought those photographs. Like they thought that was it. What was it like to think that way, and how different the world was, how different our worldview was. And it's just fascinating to think about. And these are still struggles going on today, societal issues as well. Yeah, and no judgment. I like the stories, you know.
Right.
And I like thinking about these things, and I'm open to the possibility. Love talking about stuff.
I think everybody loves ghost stories.
Yeah.
Whether they believe it to be entertainment or whether they believe in the possibility of it.
Yeah.
But that's why we're here.
Yeah.
And this is why we're starting this show.
Absolutely. This is us. This is who we are. This is what we talk about.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
I smoked a couple bowls from my pipe this evening of Gentleman Caller. Fabulous.
It smells so good.
What about your cigar? Did you get 2 tonight or just the one?
Nope, just the one. Yeah, it ended. It smoked well tonight. The weather's been nice.
It is real nice.
Yeah. Thankfully, we're getting into winter months, and it'll be a lot more bearable to do these podcasts.
Yeah. You're going to have the garage door shut and quiet. But the crickets and owls are nice if you can hear them. So
That owl was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a great episode.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for listening to Through the Prairie Smoke. We'll see you next time. No,
Bye.
we won't see you. You'll hear us next time. It's an audio medium.
Play us out.
Yeah, play us out. That'll be our catchphrase.
Flickers in the darkened room. We gather around the table, calling through the gloom. Whispers of the afterlife drift on the air. Victorian ladies and gents ready for a scare. Just not the seance, a knock on the wall. Spirit rapping echoes, we hear the dead's call. Fingers touch the planchette, cold as the night. The veil between worlds feels thin, just right. We see the unseen, the verse is long gone. Guided by spirits, we carry on. Knock, knock from the other side. The box to say the spirits can't hide. We're reaching out to the world unknown. Through whispers, knocks, and a ghostly moan. Candles burn low, the veil is thin. In this seance, let the spirits in. Lee and Margaret and Kate, they led the way. With spirit rapping tricks, they made the dead sway. We sit with them now at the table's edge, summoning the lost with a psychic pledge. A knock for yes, a tap for no. The language of the dead and the candles glow. Cold hands and shadows, we tremble in fear. But the spirits speak and we strain to hear. Messages from ether, secrets untold. We're drawn to the mystery as the night unfolds. Knock, knock from the other side. The box to say the spirits can't hide. We're reaching out to the world unknown. Through whispers, knocks, and a ghostly moan. Candles burn low, the veil is thin. In this seance, let the spirits in. The medium speaks, eyes roll back in trance. We all hold our breath, not a single glance. Ectoplasm flows, voices rise from the air. The living and the dead share a moment rare. Is it real or illusion? We may never know. But the spirits dance as the candles glow. Knock, knock from the other side. The box is to say the spirits won't hide. We're reaching out to those long gone. Through shadow and light we carry on. The veil is thin and the spirits call. In this seance we hear it all. As dawn breaks, the table is still. The spirits retreat, their voices chill. But we'll gather again under the moon's soft light to summon the dead in the heart of the night.